Alright, guys, it's time for a new series, and I think y'all are going to like this one. It's time that we started talking about anabolic steroids. Now, this is a very loaded topic that I'm sure y'all know is a very loaded topic. I want to preface everything by saying I am not a medical doctor. If you choose to use performance enhancing drugs, please, for the love of God, talk to a medical doctor and get supervision. I think that you should have the right to do whatever you want with your body, but I also think that for your own health and safety, you should do things the right way. And so I highly recommend that. Now, this is going to be a long series because there's a hell of a lot to talk about. This is a fuck ton more complicated than getting strong. So be patient. We're going to start with a topic that I think is really important. Y'all might not, and it's not going to be essential to understanding the rest of the series, but it is, I think, important to understand kind of the history of anabolic steroids and how they've gotten the reputation that they have today, so you can make an informed decision when you go to talk to your doctor. Okay? So, steroids have a bad rap. They really do. They have a bad rap because of a bunch of factors that get really complicated. And I'm going to include in the description below some links, some academic articles that you guys can use, academic and popular articles that you guys can use to inform yourself about the history of anabolic steroids. But I think the reason that they've been demonized as much as they have has a lot to do with when they were first introduced. So anabolic testosterone, specifically synthetic testosterone, was first synthesized in 1935, and it was designed to be kind of the equivalent of the female hormones that we have today, in the form of birth control and a lot of other ways that we improve women's lives through the use of hormones. They wanted a male version that would do the same thing for men. Now, that sounds all well and good, but the problem with when it was first synthesized, the doctors thought, this is going to be kind of, or many of the doctors involved thought this is going to be kind of a miracle drug, because they realized during testing, hey, this makes you look better, this makes you feel better. They weren't totally sure how it worked, but it worked damn well. And when you compare it to other controversial drugs, things like antidepressants, things like stimulants, ADHD medication, we still don't fully understand how all that stuff works either. But for some people, it works really good, and it drastically increases the quality of their lives. So the original doctors were really enthused by this. The problem was, you got to remember what was going on in 1935, all right? Society was vastly different than it is today. So in 1930, especially when you're talking about sex. So think about women in the 1930s. Think about proper dress in the 1930s. Sexuality and promiscuity specifically was considered extremely socially taboo. Now, that was not okay. And the doctors were concerned because if you've taken testosterone, it really increases your libido. So they were really concerned that, hey, we're encouraging these social snafus, for lack of a better term, things that aren't morally acceptable in our society. And so from the very start, testosterone was kind of demonized in that respect, but not because of the performance enhancing effects that you typically associate with testosterone today, right? Performance enhancement in another situation. Of course, later you had medicines like Viagra and Cialis developed, and it wasn't all that necessary for testosterone itself, wasn't all that necessary for that area. But even before then, before it was first synthesized, these hormones already had a bad reputation because of some of the experiments that were done with male hormones. So, for example, guys might have heard the rumors that testosterone came from monkey balls to begin with, and that's actually it's half true, maybe. So there was a scientist who experimented by transplanting monkey testicles into people with hypogonadism. And obviously, it's pretty fucking sketchy. There was even a scenario where prisoners were subjected to the same thing. They were transplanted with the testicles of dead prisoners, right? So you can see, you tell that to a person, they're going to be pretty fucking creeped out. And then when you compare you start talking about male hormones, it's so complicated, people kind of lose sight of, okay, what's actually going on here? What's medicine? What's pseudoscience? What's fucking nightmare sci-fi shit? And it all kind of gets conflated. And for that reason, testosterone fails to take off in the 1930s as a popular hormone replacement drug for men. Now, it gets even worse, okay, so after World War II, right? Sexual promiscuity is still, frowned upon, but it's not nearly to the same degree as it was prior to the war. And you start to see developments like the invention of the bikini, for example, came after the dropping of the atomic bomb, and that's actually where we get the term bombshell from, when you're talking about a hot girl. And then you can go forward into the 1960s, and then obviously things have changed drastically. But the problem was, by then, you're dealing with the Cold War issues. And now testosterone is seen as performance-enhancing drug in another light, right? Performance-enhancing in terms of sport performance. And now it's demonized because of that. Principally because the first people to start using were the Russians, who kept kicking our asses in the Olympics. And during the Cold War, that was really, really fucking important, because national pride was, a source of safety and security. We got to be bigger and stronger than these people, because if we end up going to nuclear war, we got to be able to kick their asses. And so essentially we made excuses saying, hey, you're cheating using these hormones. Our athletes aren't going to use them. Now, our athletes did use them, just like our athletes weren't truly amateurs all the time. Sometimes they got cushy jobs in replacement for or in compensation for their performance at the Olympics, other sorts of incentives like that, but it still wasn't state-run and mandated like it was in Russia, so you kind of had at least some distinction there. But the end result is that these hormones stay kind of taboo. And not, in my opinion, for good reason, right? They're not looking at the health effects. It's not until much, much later that they start to realize, hey, there are negative consequences of this stuff, especially if you abuse it, in terms of the scientific literature. Now, in terms of actual experience, people did know this, because here's the thing. Let's take powerlifting, right? The history of powerlifting is an example. So steroids in powerlifting were introduced by Dr. John Ziegler in the 1950s, after the war, in the form of Dianabol, D-ball, you've probably heard it called by. And obviously D-ball works really, really fucking well. D-ball is it's supposed to be a synthetic version of testosterone. Again, the chemistry gets really complicated. I'm not going to get into that here. But the point is, Ziegler intended for these athletes, the powerlifters, or weightlifters actually, excuse me, to take very, very small doses of the Dianabol. But guys, if you're an athlete, right? You take a little bit of something, it works, you're going to take a hell of a lot more. You're going to tell me you've never taken 2 scoops of pre-workout? Come on now. You have. So it's kind of the same deal. They didn't realize what these drugs were doing, other than they were making them hella strong, until they began to experience side effects. In particular, testicular atrophy, because taking the Dianabol is going to shut down your natural production of testosterone. So you've got a lot of different factors here, right, that are all contributing this demonization of steroids. Even the athletes themselves, some of them didn't want this in sport. That's where the reason we have 50 different powerlifting divisions today is because one group wanted to be clean and the other group wanted to use drugs because they knew the drugs worked really well and really fun, and the other group didn't want to take them because of the potential side effects, or for any other reason, right? It's a personal choice. It always has been, but at the same time, it's become a political issue that has resulted in this very, very strong negative reputation. So, as we move forward with this series, what I want you guys to keep in mind is that chances are, unless you've already educated yourself on the topic using academic literature, chances are you're probably biased in one way or another towards this subject. Either you think, steroids are God's gift to man, or you think they're, or the pathway to becoming God, or you think they're this horrible affront to social norms. And the truth, like all truths, is somewhere in the middle. So throughout the rest of this series, we're going to try to investigate that in more detail and talk about how you can develop a more balanced mindset for yourself.